Are you ready to break free from old patterns and create positive change that ripples through generations? Welcome to the Cycle Starters Sanctuary, a free healing community where ancestral wisdom, astrology, and pleasure converge for conscious evolution and generational empowerment. Join our vibrant community of female-bodied beings across all lineages and cultures committed to breaking intergenerational patterns. You'll get access to monthly live Q&A sessions with guest experts, exclusive content, early announcements about upcoming events, and our free Navigating the Cosmos guide. Ready for a deeper journey? You can upgrade to our Astro-Ancestral Healing Collective for an enhanced experience with guided new moon pleasure practices, expert workshops, and a supportive private community. Visit heatherrebeccawilson.com/sanctuary to join our sacred space and start your healing journey today. Together, we're creating new cycles filled with ancestral wisdom, healing, and embodied joy. We'll see you there. Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Starters podcast. I'm your host, Heather Rebecca Wilson, and I am absolutely passionate about ancestral healing and pleasure and astrology as transformative medicine to support you on your astro-ancestral healing journey. So today we're doing something a little bit different. I am super excited to introduce you to my friend, my sister, Xandrine Ayla, who has actually been on the podcast before. I've been on her podcast, Filipina Unleashed, and I'm hoping that I will be a guest on her new podcast, the Magnetic Self podcast. Welcome, Xandrine. Hi.
Hi, Heather. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this chat.
I'm always
So
excited to chat with you. So I want to give you a moment here, or a few moments, to introduce yourself and tell our community, what you do, who you are, all the things.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm Xandrine, and I love supporting women who are visionaries, leaders, and just driven and passionate in their mission to come back home to their bodies, their pleasure, their ease, their worth, a deeper layer of feminine embodiment where they are receptive to their intuition, where they are grounded in their bodies, and so that they're aligned in their soul mission. And so I have been in this space for, about 8 years, and my work has evolved and it's blended beautifully my path of learning these modern mindset techniques from NLP and hypnosis, but as well as ancient practices from Taoism and Tantra, and my background in yoga philosophy, Ayurveda. So what I offer is a very holistic approach, and it's just my passion to support women to really up level in their lives and the way that they are moving forward in a more embodied, grounded way.
Love it. You're so special and you're an inspiration. So I'm very honored to know you. And I'm really excited to be chatting today. So what do you think? Let's talk about how we met. So when did we meet? Was it like 2017?
I think it was 2016. So 2016, we were in a transformational coaching program, certification program, actually. And we were both in LA at that time. And so we decided that we were going to meet up and we were going to be accountability sisters. And then we ended up doing work sessions together in our favorite cafe. So I remember that's how our friendship started.
Yes. We met in the coaching program. And, the really beautiful thing that pertains to the work both you and I do is that we have common ancestry. So my maternal ancestors are from the Visayan Islands of Leyte, Samar, and Panay, in what is now known as the Philippines. And then my paternal ancestors are from all over West Africa, but primarily Nigeria and Ghana. And then I also have ancestors from the British Isles of Northern Europe. So, Xandrine, will you tell people about your ancestry?
Yeah, it's quite similar actually. So both my mother and my father have ancestry in the Philippines. My father has ancestry from the Visayan region, specifically Iloilo, and then they migrated to Bacolod. My mom's side is from Ilocos Norte, and they both also have that mix of the Spanish as we were colonized by Spain. And then on both sides, interestingly enough, both my great grandfathers were white men with blue eyes and blonde hair from Ohio, and they were coal miners who ventured out into Asia and intermarried into the Spanish Filipino indigenous ancestry that I have. So I'm quite the mix, a little bit of everything. It's been also a really interesting experience and journey to really understand where I position myself, because I really do feel like I can relate to what I've learned to be a term, which is like the third culture kid, where sometimes you're neither here, near or there, where you're somewhere in the middle. And it's been a process of really finding that sense of belonging, which has been an interesting part of my journey.
We have so much in common.
I
It's
feel like you have
super
that too,
amazing.
right? Do you relate to
Yeah,
that?
I 100% relate to that. I think because I am racially ambiguous.
Right.
I mean, we can just get into it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big part of my story. This is a big part of my ancestral healing journey. So, I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and I didn't have any Filipino friends.
Mm.
We would have relatives come and visit, but my mom never taught me Tagalog, or Waray, which is her dialect. But of course, throughout my life, I've picked up a lot, so I know enough to know when someone is talking shit about me or somebody else. Like,
At least you know that.
yes,
Good
I
to
know
know.
that. I know enough. But I was really not connected to my Filipino identity
Mm.
growing up. My relatives lived mostly on the West Coast in Northern California. And then I had some relatives in the Philippines. And I actually didn't go to the Philippines until I was, I don't know, 23 years old for the first time. So I grew up in a very, very white privileged suburb of DC, and my parents, and I'm really grateful to them for this, they put me in a really awesome private school. I was in private school my whole life, and the school that I graduated from, when I graduated from high school, I went there for years. It was very small and it was very white. And so I think people didn't know what I was.
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of the other, but I had no understanding of this really until I was about 9 years old. And so this is my core wounding around not belonging, not being worthy, or not feeling worthy. So I found out in fourth grade that my close friends were going to this dance party once a month. And because I started to see pictures of them all dressed up, and I was like, what is this? What party
Yeah.
was this? And they're like, oh, this is just this dance class that we go to where we do the waltz and the foxtrot and learn manners and etiquette and whatnot. And I was very precocious, very social. And I was like, I want to go to this. This sounds like fun. And so they told me, well, you have to be invited. So talk to your parents about it. And so I remember asking my parents, how do I get invited to this thing? Can you find out? And so, some time passes. I can't remember how long it was, but my parents sat me down and said, hey, we talked to Mrs. So and so, and she said that, maybe next year you can join. And I was so confused. I was like, why can't I join this year? And why
Mm.
is it a maybe? I just didn't understand. And so I get back to school and I tell my friends that I can't join. Maybe I can join next year, trying to get some clarity on the situation. And I don't think they knew that I was Black or Filipina. They just were like, it's Heather. Because my dad's very fair skinned. My dad is a light skinned Black guy with freckles and red hair. He had a big red afro when he married my mom. So he's also ambiguous racially. So, but what my friends told me was, well, they don't allow Black people and they only allow Jewish people if they're rich. So this is what my 9-year-old friends are telling me. And obviously they're just parroting what their parents have told them. And so this was my loss of innocence moment. I was confronted with this reality, right? Of I'm never going to belong. Right? I'm not worthy of belonging and I need to work really hard to prove that I belong.
Yeah.
And because of my parents' lack of consciousness around these issues, around racial identity issues, and that's not their fault. They're just a product of the environment they grew up in. My dad grew up during the Jim Crow era in the States where Blacks and whites had separate water fountains. So he was very hardened, not very emotional. He was just like, toughen up. This is what life is, and my mom really didn't understand because growing up in the Philippines, they're in their 80s now. So she was born during World War II. And so she has colonial mentality, though I think she's evolved and changed over the years, especially as I've taken a deep dive into ancestral healing work. For those of you who don't know what colonial mentality is, it's basically white is right. Anything American is better than anything Filipino, and also anything indigenous that is outside of Catholicism, because the Spanish had colonized the Philippines for 400 years. Anything indigenous or outside of that religious upbringing that they knew was primitive, was of the devil, was uncivilized. And so, because of her upbringing and her mentality, she also wasn't able to support me in that moment. And so, yeah, it was a loss of innocence moment and a point where I realized that I just have to rely on myself. My parents aren't going to help me with this, at 9 years old. So yeah, that was a big heartbreak for me. And I knew that in ninth grade, a lot of new students came into the school, and I could see just observing the older kids ahead of me that there were more Black students in the high school. And so I was so excited to get to high school because I was like, I'm going to have people around me who see me and I'm finally going to fit in and I'm finally going to feel like I belong. And so what happened in ninth grade in the beginning of the school year, I decided I'm going to go to the Black Student Union meeting, right? This is like part of our activities. We go to different clubs or whatever. And so I remember walking in and people just turning their heads like, what is she doing here? Which was also another big heartbreak moment for me because I had built up all this excitement and anticipation that I was going to finally fit in somewhere. But even there, I wasn't fitting in. And so, yeah, it was a rough time, even though I would say, like, in general, I had a great time in school. I had a lot of friends, did well in school. I mean, I think a lot of it was that I wanted to prove that I was worthy of belonging. That was kind of what was driving me to achieve in the way that I did. But I never felt Filipino enough for my Filipino side of the family. I never felt Black enough for the Black side of my family. And I never felt white enough for my white friends at school. So that was really my childhood. But it was all, under the surface and unconscious. I really wasn't conscious of it. And I think I suppressed it. And I think a lot of that was because there wasn't anybody who really understood. I didn't know a lot of multiracial people. My parents weren't very supportive and, not in a malicious way. They weren't, it wasn't in their consciousness. So, yeah. So basically I can relate. Yeah. And I suppressed a lot of it.
Well, that's why I'm now wondering. So you suppressed that and you were somehow processing it, but not in the most conscious way, because, to have that capacity to process something like that requires, a good amount of work and awareness that a 9-year-old or a ninth grader may not have. So I'm wondering, at what point did this suppression start to be evident that, hey, there's something here that we need to look at? Tell me about that.
Okay, great question. So I would say that this is my first spiritual awakening we're talking about. So this happened in my 30s, and I would say this is like roughly 2013, 2012. And so what had happened was I found myself going through another breakup after a series of breakups. And I was, basically going from one boyfriend to another without taking a break. Okay. And so this one was so painful that it really brought me to my knees. I was like, why is this happening to me over and over again? This sucks. But the other thing that happened inside of that experience was I actually got the intuitive hit that my boyfriend at the time was going to break up with me. It just dropped into my head the day that it happened. And it was so funny because all of our friends, the friends that we had in common, they were like, Heather, what are you talking about? You're crazy. He's not going to break up with you. And I was like, no, he is. I feel it. And it happened. It happened that day. And I was so pissed. I was like pissed at myself more than anything. I was like, I knew this. Why didn't I just break up with you when I started feeling, the ick, right? When I started to feel like the vibe was off. So that was a big awakening for me when I realized I need to trust myself and I can trust my intuition above all else, even when everyone else is telling me that I'm crazy, that I'm overthinking something or being ridiculous. That's when I realized I have intuition.
Mm.
I feel things. I sense things. I know things. And so I would say that was the catalyst for me really going inside, turning inward to figure out what's going on. Why am I repeating this pattern all the time of dating these people who aren't right for me or who can't see me or whatever? And so I would say maybe a few months after that breakup, I was working at the time at the school where I had all of this racial identity development trauma. I was working there. I was running the community service program, and I started to have some conversations about my childhood, my experience there with some of my mentors who were still there. So basically, I ended up living with the woman, this amazing being who was my ninth grade advisor. She ended up becoming the assistant head of the school. I ended up living with her. One of my art teachers from intermediate school, which was seventh and eighth grade, who also drove the bus occasionally, he and I became really good friends. And so I'm chatting with these elders, these mentors who have become friends. And of course, they were curious about what my experience was like, going to this school as a person of color. And that's when everything started to bubble up. I went back to the fourth grade experience of realizing like all of my friends were going to this racist and prejudiced thing, right? And also the ninth grade experience started to come up, and I just all of these tears, and those instances would come up in the past, but I wasn't really ready to confront them and deal with them and do the integration work until that time when I was in my 30s. Because I would remember it would come up and I would start sweating. I would feel a knot in my throat, but I would always just shove it back in the closet, sweep it back under the rug. Nobody wants to hear about this. It's fine. But that's when it broke. It broke through in my 30s. And then one of my colleagues, who was also Filipino, teaching in the fifth grade, said, Heather, you have to go to the Diversity Leadership Institute. You need to go. When I went, I finally realized why I'm working at the school and why I'm a teacher and what my purpose is. And so you should really go. The school will pay for it. You should go. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go. At that point, I was willing to try and do anything to feel more in alignment, to feel more on my mission and my purpose. And I also got a coach at that time too, because I was trying to transform this pattern, of going from relationship to relationship and not being happy. And so the Diversity Leadership Institute was incredible for me because I finally got at least an intellectual understanding of my racial identity development trauma. So I got a framework and a language for talking about it. And that was so inspiring to me. I just really felt empowered by it, and it was just very enlightening. And so I was invited to attend the People of Color conference that was run by the National Association of Independent Schools that also ran the Diversity Leadership Institute. So this is like a big conference in early December, and they do it in different locations. And so the school always sends a bunch of kids there because there's programming for the students to develop their leadership skills. And then they send administrators, educators, board of trustees, all sorts of folks to this thing. And so I attended the Multiracial Affinity Group. And so for those of you who aren't aware of what an affinity group is, it's basically a group where everybody identifies in the same way. And the beautiful thing about it is that you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to teach about your experience. You can just be. And so I found myself in a room with 80 other multiracial people, all different textures of hair, all different shades of skin, but everybody identified as multiracial. And it was a spiritual moment. It was like I was in church. I was like, oh my God, these are my people. We all had the same experience. And
sounds like a homecoming of sorts.
It was totally a homecoming, and it was so beautiful. And I also felt there was so much pain in that room. There was so much pain. And so I was very inspired after that experience to do something, create something from it, And so I decided I'm going to give a talk. I'm going to give a talk at the school on multiracial identity development, which is basically my story, what had happened to me at the school, and how I had grown and evolved and what I'd learned, everything that I learned from the Diversity Leadership Institute, the affinity group, blah, blah, blah. And so I think this was in like 2016, actually, 2015, right before I met you. I gave this presentation. It was very nerve-wracking, but I did it, and it was very well received. It was something I had to do. I had to do this. And so because it was so well received, I decided, well, I need to keep going with this. And so the following year at the People of Color conference, which was where I first attended that multiracial affinity group, I decided I was going to put on a workshop for educators. And so it was called The Power of Storytelling in Diversity Work. And so that was also really well received, and it was a great experience. People really enjoyed it, and it was definitely a confidence boost for me as a teacher, as a presenter, as a speaker, as a facilitator. And so I was really excited to do more diversity, equity, and inclusion work at the school. However, this is pre-George Floyd. This was when folks were really lacking in consciousness around race. And so, what you would hear was Barack Obama's president, racism is over. And what ended up happening was that it became a really toxic environment for me to be in. So I ended up leaving because they didn't, at the time, they didn't see the need to invest more in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That changed. That changed when George Floyd happened, because I think that was a spiritual awakening for people in the US, but all over the world, honestly, during the pandemic. But it was before that. And so I decided to leave and pursue coaching. And so that's how I got into the group coaching program that you and I met in. And actually, my first coaching offering was around supporting multiracial people or multiracial women. But again, it was pre-George Floyd, and so it just completely fell flat. But also, looking back, I was still early on in my journey. You know what I mean? I don't think it was ready
You
to
hadn't fully
pop.
ripened yet.
Yeah,
You were also still
exactly.
in your process and your journey, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, not wanting to be the loser in our coaching group, who was focusing on a niche where nothing was happening, because there's pressure in these entrepreneurial groups and circles, right? I want to be successful. I want to be one of the stars, and so I just completely abandoned all that DEI work and just focused on life coaching. And, I played around with different niches and nothing really stuck. And then I found Layla Martin and her sex, love, and relationships coaching certification that focused on tantric practices, Taoist practices, but also combining that with the latest advancements in neuroscience. And this completely spoke to me. I was like, yes, yes. And even before I joined that program, I was starting to use the jade egg. I was really drawn to it. Not that I was having any issues necessarily, but I was just magnetized towards that practice. I just felt like there's something here for me to uncover and unravel. I feel like this is going to be really empowering for me. I don't know why. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to feel like, but there's something that's calling me intuitively.
Well, how was that introduced to you? I thought that that was introduced to you by the program of Layla Martin, and now you're telling me that was before that.
No, it
So
was
tell me a little bit about
before.
how that.
It was like, I don't even remember, but I think it was maybe a year before. I think it started to come up in conversation actually with people in the program that we were in. I'm pretty sure definitely Lauren Joyce and I were talking about it. So
We could have talked about it too, because that was already a part of my practice at that
yeah.
time. Yeah.
So yeah, I signed up for that program and it was so intense. I mean, the workload for that was just unbelievable, but I was so into it. I was really passionate about everything that I was learning. And if you're going to hold space for people with the jade egg practice, you need to have done it yourself. So I had to do a lot of jade egg sessions with myself. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what the jade egg is, it is a carved piece of jade, right? It's carved in the shape of an egg, and it is worn inside of the vagina to tone and strengthen the pelvic floor. And it has ancient Taoist roots going back thousands and thousands of years. The practice is mentioned in the Yellow Emperor's classic, the Yellow Emperor's book of medicine. So it's an ancient practice. It's been said that it was used by courtesans and priestesses to cultivate spiritual energy, to increase their vitality, their beauty, their aliveness. So
Well,
all
tell
that.
me what the crystal egg has done for you. I'm wanting to know when you started to really dive into this practice, what did it bring about in you?
Well, the first thing I noticed was that my level of wetness increased tangibly. Tangibly. Not that I had a vaginal dryness issue at all, but I noticed what's going on here? I was like, wow, look, I'm very juicy, right? This is cool. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. That was the first thing that I noticed, so in a way it was just kind of waking everything up. So what happened was, I guess a year after I completed the program, Layla reached out to me and said, do you want to lead a DEI workshop for the 2018 cohort? Because she and I had a little convo at the business retreat in Palm Springs, I think in 2017. And so I think that conversation stuck with her, and she felt like it was really necessary for the new cohort to have some exposure to how do you create a coaching business that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, of course, I said yes. And I remember right before giving this presentation. This was like to 100 people online. I was literally vibrating. I was literally shaking. That was very well received. People loved it. When it was done, I was shaking. I was vibrating. It was crazy. And then because I was still in this, toxic productivity mindset, the hustling, very masculine mindset, even though I had done so much work, my mentality at the time was, okay, well, I need to strike while the iron is hot, and I need to just keep riding this wave and keep building this momentum. And so because people knew of me as an expert, I started getting tagged in all of these really toxic conversations around race on Facebook, inside of these Facebook groups, right? These different coaching groups. Like, Heather, come in here and like tell this person what they're missing and la, la, la. And so I started doing that, and it was really bad for me. It was really, really bad for me. The level of cruelty and contempt that was coming out in these conversations was just unbelievable to me, that I went into a deep depression. It was a combination of depression and anxiety. And I realized I can't do this anymore. I need to be more protective of my energy. I can't be, even when I'm invited to insert myself, basically that's spiritual labor, it's emotional labor, it's intellectual labor. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm getting drained by this. I'm getting hurt by this. And so I really had to pull back. And I was also dating somebody at the time who was really lacking in racial consciousness, who was also in an addiction cycle. So I was living my own personal hell. Professionally, trying to figure out how to navigate doing DEI, but in a way that felt good to me. And then at home, I'm fighting with my partner about, is racism real? And what about racism, towards white people? All of these crazy, crazy conversations that I found myself engaging in. And so I was having suicidal thoughts. I was like, I hate this world. I'm so disappointed in humanity. I don't want to be here anymore. And I ended up going home for a little bit, flying back to the East Coast. I went on some meds because I wasn't sleeping. I was just not feeling good at all. I mean, my parents are doctors, so luckily that was easy for me to to get a hold of something. And so I was, taking the meds for a few weeks until I felt better, but I was not feeling good. And so I decided I need to go see my acupuncturist because this is just unbearable. I just was feeling, again, just so much anxiety, so much depression. And I crawled into her office. And I was like, you have to help me. I feel like whatever is vibrating inside of me is going to destroy me. It's going to obliterate me. I don't know what's going on. And so she did some cupping on my back to release all the grief and sadness that gets stored in the lungs. She put some needles in me, which was great. And I felt so much better after that one session. And it was in that session that it all finally clicked, because she said something to the effect of, Heather, this is a massive energetic clearing of something. I don't know what it is, but it's a massive energetic clearing. And so after that, I cried every day for days. And I'm getting teary just thinking about it, but it wasn't my grief. It was so big. It was so big. It was so otherworldly. I'm crying for my mom right now. I'm crying for my grandmother, my grandmothers. It was just unbelievable waves of sadness. And I just let it all happen. I lived in an apartment complex with a courtyard in the middle, and a grassy courtyard. And I would just sit in the courtyard and cry. But luckily my neighbors were my friends, and everybody was really sweet. But
So
yeah,
you're telling me
I
it's
had to do a lot of crying.
you felt the pain of your mother, you felt the pain of your grandmothers. So would you say that you were carrying the collective pain body in your body, and that was the release of it?
Yeah.
And you coming to terms with all of that you were actually holding, not realizing it, and that letting that come out in waves, hence you crying.
Yes.
For days.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. Well, I just want to say and acknowledge how brave you are to be able to do this work, to be able to have that compassion to hold that for the collective and to be able to process it. That is no easy feat, because I know that you are already carrying the pain of your own personal experience. But then it sounds like because you were getting into this work even more, and let's say being in that room of, wow, on one hand, it felt like a homecoming, but on the other hand, you felt the pain and how there was a lot of healing that needed to be done. And you were aware of that. And it sounds like that this was the journey in, because I feel like when we're space holders as leaders and as people who have a purposeful mission, I do believe that the work is done on us first, which is why it's like really a path of a lot of courage and bravery. So I want to acknowledge that in you, that you went there and you're still there. You're still here. You're still doing the work.
I'm still doing it. And thank you. Thank you for seeing me and for witnessing me. Tying it back to the jade egg practices and the root healing practices, basically what I realized going through that training program and actually doing the practice myself is that as female bodied beings, we store a lot of unprocessed, stagnant energy in our pelvic landscape, in our pelvic bowl, and specifically inside of the vagina, in the cervix. And so engaging with the jade egg or the crystal egg practice, what it does is that it creates sensate focus inside of your vagina, right? Inside of your cervix. And in Taoism, different regions of your vagina and the cervix as well, they correspond to different organs and different emotions. And so doing those practices over and over again, I started to wake everything up and I became more sensitive because the vagus nerve, right, which is how your body communicates with the brain, because it terminates at the cervix. Doing these practices consistently, it brings your entire nervous system online. And so that clearing would not have happened without having done all that root healing work. You know, it just kind of loosened everything up. And it was only after that that I was ready to release all that stuff. So that was a huge wave of energy coming through. I mean, it was massive. Like, I cannot explain to you the size, the potency of it. Because I remember I told the acupuncturist, this is going to obliterate me.
Yeah.
This is going to kill me.
If you don't do anything about it.
Yeah. If I don't do something about it.
So you did something about it. And part of that was the jade egg practice. Part of it was, I'm understanding that it was allowing the waves to come through and move through you so that you could release it. But I'm wondering if there's any other practices that you can highlight that really were supportive in this time of allowing all that to be released.
My circle became a lot smaller at the time because honestly, I didn't want to be around a lot of white people at the time. And it sounds harsh, but I didn't feel safe at the time. I needed to be around people who had some consciousness around race relations and how there was such a huge collective pain body around race, you know? So my circle got tighter, it got smaller. So yeah, I just was in a period of rest. So I was getting acupuncture regularly. I was getting body work regularly. I was continuing to meditate. I was in front of my altar. You know, I had a great ancestral altar set up. And I left the workforce. Like, I haven't had a job since then, since that massive energetic clearing in 2018. I've just been doing my coaching work, my consulting work. So yeah, I exited the workforce, the traditional workforce. And I realized that that's a privilege. Not everybody has that ability, the capacity to do that. I'm very, very fortunate that I was able to do that. So yeah, I just really invested in my healing. Like I said, more acupuncture, more body work, more massages. Cannabis definitely supported me through that time. And psilocybin started to support me after that. And I still engage with psilocybin at least seasonally to just clear out my energy. Once things started to settle down a little bit, I got the intuitive hit that I needed to start facilitating women of color healing circles because that's what I would have needed at the time, right?
That was going to be my next question. And I love that you just transitioned into that because I had a feeling that that massive release was clearing the space in order for something so potent and profound and needed to be birthed.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me how that then translated into your work.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I think one of the qualities that I've somehow exhibited throughout my life is that when I'm going through something difficult, I know somehow that there's a reason for it and something really beautiful is on the other side of it. And so,
Nice.
as scary as this was for me, to have suicidal ideation, to be like, I don't think I want to be here anymore. That's pretty severe for me because I have Jupiter in the first house. I am a very happy-go-lucky, fun-loving person. So for me to be like, I don't want to be here, that's a big deal. But I also knew intuitively something had to move, right? It was so dark and scary because something beautiful was on the other side. I don't know. I'm just wired this way, but I was just like, I'm going to buckle up and just go on this journey. So I got the hit. I need to start facilitating women of color healing circles. I also got the hit that I needed to get off birth control. And that was huge. And I haven't been on the pill since 2018. And it was really fucked up when I learned that because no one tells you this in the doctor's
Nobody
office.
tells
They
you
don't
this.
tell you that, oh,
I
actually,
was so mad about that.
you haven't ovulated in 20 years, right? And so I was so disconnected from myself and I didn't even know. So got off birth control, started doing the women of color healing circles, which was so healing and beautiful for me. And after doing that for a few months, I was like, you know what? I need to do some jade egg sessions. I need to do some workshops because this has been such a helpful self-healing tool for me along my ancestral healing journey for the reasons I explained before, right? We carry so much stagnant energy in the pelvic landscape. And also everything that penetrates you, whether it's consensual or not, the cervix remembers, right? And also when your mother gives birth to you, whether it's natural or via cesarean section, you get imprinted by her unresolved root chakra issues. I think my mom actually had a miscarriage a few years before she had me when she was married to her first husband. So that trauma was still in her body and that was imprinted onto me, So I really saw there's a need for this embodiment work, this root healing work is really necessary for somebody to really experience transformation in terms of dissolving these generational patterns. So started doing jade egg workshops for women across all lineages and cultures. But for a while, I was like, I only want to hang with women of color. That's just my safe space right now. This is what I need to feel good, to feel safe. But once I had done that for a while, I started to feel like, okay, I can be around other women who are on this level. So that's kind of where everything took a turn and led to where I am now. So I did go back to doing DEI work, but I had to do my own healing work and figure out how I could do it in a boundaried way where it didn't drain my energy. And so during the pandemic, the first 8 months of the pandemic, I actually was home in Virginia caretaking for my dad who got really, really sick in the beginning of March.
Right
And
when the pandemic started.
Yes, right when it started. So when he first went into the hospital, we could all go. And then the next day, they're like, one person at a time, and you need to wear a hazmat suit. And then the next day, nobody can come. So it was crazy. And that was a huge part of my ancestral healing journey too, because George Floyd happened at that time. And thank God I had done my healing work around
Prior
that,
to
or
that?
a big part of it. Like I had that big release because I had to witness and have conversations with members of my family who are all processing it in a very different way. And I swear to God, if I had not done my work, I literally would have left the planet or be in jail
Yeah.
because
You wouldn't have been able to hold that energy
no way.
because that was also really intense. I remember that. That was really intense for me. So I can also imagine how intense that was for you.
Yeah, because there was so much internalized anti-Blackness in
Mm.
my family
Mm.
that all came to the surface, and it was really painful. It was really painful. But if I had not done my work, I mean, God knows what would have happened. So it's all divinely organized, you know? So I did eventually return to DEI work, but I only work with people who approach it in the same way as I do, which is it's a healing. It's elevating your consciousness. It's a healing process, you know. So
Yeah.
I've
Tell me how that's
collaborated.
evolved because you were doing that work prior, but then you went through this whole journey. You went through your release, you went through the pandemic and the whole George Floyd incident. And so, how has your work around DEI shifted over the years? Where is it at now?
Where it's at now is, like I said, I only collaborate or work for folks who approach it in the same way, in terms of it's a healing, right? We don't need to demonize people for lacking in consciousness. We just need to meet people where they're at. And so I'm way more discerning when it comes to engaging in conversations with people around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It needs to be inside of a container where I'm getting compensated, basically, because I have a lot of wisdom to share around this. I have a lot of embodied, lived experience to share with folks. I know this content in my bones, but I don't engage in these conversations unless I feel like somebody really is open. You know what I'm saying? It's like pearls before swine. Have you heard that expression? If I sense that this person is not open to pick up what I'm laying down, I'm not
Hmm.
laying it down, you know? So I'm just very, very discerning with it. And the vibe has to feel right. And I've been doing a lot of trauma informed leadership work, mentoring trauma informed leaders, which overlaps with DEI. It completely overlaps. It's just kind of approaching it from a different angle. But yeah, all I can say is I'm way more selective and choosy about, when and where and with whom I engage these conversations.
As you should. And I love how your journey has created this evolution in your embodiment, in your work, and how it's shared, right? So I want to hear about the different ways that you're sharing your work. I mean, you have this podcast. So tell me about the inspiration of how you started this and yeah, a little bit about how it's going, what it's about, and the value that it provides.
Thank you for that question. Rewind to 2020. And actually, this is right around the time of George Floyd. I'm at home in Virginia, living with my elderly parents, still caregiving. And I had some time on my hands, right? Because I wasn't really working. And so I decided I'm going to take advantage of this and I'm going to take a deep dive into things that I've always wanted to learn on a deeper level, but I just didn't have the time. And so I am really going to learn how to read tarot. I am also really going to dive into astrology. And so I got certified as a life path astrology reader in 2020. And that was huge for me because I love reading charts. I learned so much about myself reading my own chart. It was at that time that astrology started to become a huge part of my life and part of my practice. And the way that I relate to astrology, I think is important to take note of. So for me, astrology, it's not the rule, but it is a very, very powerful tool in terms of giving you a language and framework for understanding yourself as an energetic being, as a vessel of divine energy. So it's just wonderful in terms of supporting everybody to develop more self-compassion, more compassion for others. And just to give you an example of this, for my whole life, I had bias against Geminis. You know, they're two-faced, they're gossipy, they are flaky, la la la. Turns out when I do my chart, I'm a Gemini rising, okay? And your rising sign is your perception of reality. It's your initial energetic impression. It's what people notice about you right away that you actually may not be conscious of. And so that was huge for me because I was like, "Oh my God, all of these qualities that I don't like, I am this," right? And obviously, every astrological sign has a high expression and a low expression because they're all just a spectrum of psycho-spiritual energy. So it gave me just, yeah, more self-compassion. I'm like, oh my God, look at all this shit that I was projecting onto other people, right? All of this shadow stuff. But also, what was in the shadow was the good Gemini qualities that I wasn't seeing in myself, that I wasn't accepting and loving about myself. You know, the fact that I am a lifelong learner. I am curious. I love to study. I love to consume information. I love to talk with people. I love to communicate. I love to speak and write, you know? And I wasn't recognizing that about myself. So that's just one example of how it just kind of broke everything open for me. So after a while, I think after trying to fit myself back into the diversity, equity, and inclusion space in terms of, you know, being palatable for corporate America, I gave up on that. I was like, this sucks. I'm sick of having a website for my healing work and then having a different website that is my corporate facing website. This is absolute bullshit. I got to stop doing this. And so I got inspired to create a monthly membership, and it is called the Astro-Ancestral Healing Collective. And it is a sacred space for female bodied cycle breakers to alchemize deep ancestral wounds into creative potential, shifts to higher consciousness, and embodied joy with astrology and pleasure as medicine. And I include pleasure in this equation because for me, pleasure is the fuel that sustains you through your ancestral healing journey because there are so many ups and downs. And as we've just discussed, it can be physically painful. I mean, literally, when I was on the grass weeping for days and days, it hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like the
Physically, emotionally. Yeah.
heartbreak of it all. I was carrying the heartbreak of generations in my cells. So the journey's not for the faint of heart. But if you can create a consistent pleasure practice, that is like dipping your nerve endings in honey, right? Like protecting your nerve endings. But also the root healing work that is part of a pleasure practice. You know, if you're using a jade egg or a crystal egg, or if you're de-armoring your vagina with a wand, I mean, I wouldn't be here today without having done that work of creating a mind-body connection with my root, which is my connection to the earth, connection to my ancestors, my connection to other dimensions. So I love the membership. We have a new moon pleasure practice and dance party every month. And then I have a guest expert come in and teach a workshop every month. And I
Which
love
I've
doing
done.
it. Yes, you've done it and you were amazing. Thank you for saying yes to that. And honestly, the collaborations have really been the highlight of doing the membership. I love spotlighting other practitioners who are doing amazing work out there in the world. So the podcast, right, this podcast that we're on, the Cycle Starters podcast, came out of these interviews that I was doing on IG Live every month because I figured, okay, I've got this amazing guest teacher coming in. I need to interview them, right? This will be a great way to promote the membership. And so I did that for about a year. Also, at the time, you're doing a podcast, and I'm like, maybe, you know, I don't know, it seems really hard, whatever. I had all these stories about why it wasn't the right time. And then we celebrated the 1 year anniversary of the membership. And my friend Veronica was like, why don't you have a podcast? I don't understand. You're basically doing this, but you're just doing it on another platform. And then I was like, okay, I guess it's time. So that was my main project this past summer. And I think my first episode was published on YouTube in September of 2024. And I'm loving it. It's great. And it's a weekly podcast. So I've been interviewing past teachers, current teachers, but I'm going to be interviewing all sorts of people. But the podcast focused on folks talking about their specific ancestral healing journeys and what it's been like for them, because everyone's journey is unique. Everyone's journey is different. And so I think for people who might be intimidated by this work, because it is intimidating, it's super intense. Not everybody's meant to do this, honestly. And that's why I don't insist that people do it, right? I don't believe in dragging people to their healing. They have to be ready. They have to come to me. They need to be open. And I've had to accept that not everybody's going to do this work. But I do think that hearing about other people, how they've navigated it, what their biggest challenges have been, I think it builds a bridge of understanding and a bridge for them to feel like, okay, maybe I can do this. And then the membership is great because we can do it in community, because my feeling is we're meant to heal in community. It's important to do your individual work for sure, but healing in community, there's just something about it that's so amazing. And doing jade egg practices, right? Embodiment practices in community is a beautiful, super powerful thing as well.
I love that you have different ways to serve. And I'm wondering if you have a person who's tuning into your podcast episodes, who's drawn to ancestral healing, who could also feel a bit intimidated because it does feel like it's a lot and they're not really sure about what it's going to bring up, because as you start to excavate and dig, it's like, ooh, I don't know if I can hold myself through all this pain and all the things that you, Heather, have mentioned. Like, I have my own stuff too. What would you say to them, and what would you recommend as a place to start?
I would start looking at your astrology chart, honestly, because I think it almost gives you a map, a blueprint of the energies that you decided to work with in this incarnation. So it kind of gives you a scaffolding to sort of hang all of these ideas on. Scaffolding that's going to create some sort of stability for you. And then I think joining a group like my membership is also a great place to start, because we're all speaking the same language. We're all on this path together, because it is not easy. It really is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And I will tell you, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, is just letting go of all of these frequencies, these patterns that weren't mine. You have to experience, I think, the lowest of the lows to really appreciate the highest of the highs. And everything is so much more beautiful and brighter and more juicy and delicious, because my nervous system is online now. My intuition, my ability to receive information in non-linear ways has just been turned up on a dial every year, more and more and more. Life is way more magical. I met my divine partner, my husband, what year was it? 2021. After having done all of this work, so he's definitely a gift from my ancestors. He has the same birthday as my grandfather. We're both multiracial. He's black and white, and so I don't have to explain anything to him. And I think you were one of the first people to point that out to me. I think when we had lunch at Superba that one time, you're like, oh yeah, it's like he gets you. He understands you. You don't have to teach him. Yes, that's exactly what it is. There's a level of comfort and ease and understanding and really seeing each other that allows me to relax, right? And just enjoy. And it's not hard. There's no work. And as intense as it's been intense in a really good, joyful, easy way. Intense in the sense that, like, this is so easy. This is so amazing. This feels so good, right? It just feels good. It doesn't feel like work. But I had to go through all of this to get to the point where I was ready to be in the type of divine partnership that I really desired, right?
100%.
Which
Yeah.
is we're building a legacy together, or we're breaking
So good.
ancestral cycles together. So, but yeah, I would just say don't do it alone. Get support. Get your astrology chart read, because I think it's really going to help you. Because while our ancestors do pass along wounds, they also give us gifts. I mean, number one, our ancestors have given us a lot of resilience. Our Filipino ancestors have been through quite a lot. Okay. So we have a lot of ancestral resilience that we can tap into. But also, we have healing powers when we transmute our Chiron placement, for example. So that's an asteroid that was discovered in 1977 that's associated with Christ consciousness. It's something that I look in everyone's chart because it represents your deepest wound, which is often ancestral, by the way, but also your healing powers when you can integrate, right? And transmute that wound. And so, yeah, there are wounds, but there are crazy, amazing spiritual gifts that come that will blow your mind. You can't even fathom what they are in the beginning.
So it's bringing me back to you reading my chart and you telling me about my Chiron.
Yeah, yeah.
So mine is Taurus, and
Me
that
too.
resonated so deeply. And I think that was like the main highlight or takeaway that I got from your reading, because it made so much sense that there was this wound around being here in the earthly plane, which also translates to material possessions and finances, and how that's also linked to the scarcity mindset that I am recoding from my ancestors.
Right.
So I love that you brought that up and how you weave astrology in, because from the outside, it might be like, wait, what does pleasure and astrology have to do with ancestral healing? And it's such a unique niche and method to go about this journey. But as I dive deeper, and I'm so blessed that I get to experience your gifts,
You're so sweet.
as it comes. I remember when you got into astrology, you're like, let me read your chart. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And, when you were doing Layla Martin's program, I was also your guinea pig, right? I was like, you're basically the person you were doing your practicums on. And it makes so much sense. Definitely see how it's all tied in and how pleasure brings about the shift from the heaviness and the pain body, and how astrology gives you the insight of what's linked and connected to this healing path. That's also very much unique to you that you get to look at. And I feel like with all these tools combined, and of course your expertise and presence, I could just imagine the potency of transformation that's happening within your circles. And having said that, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of somebody you've held space for, or some specific breakthrough that you have experienced in one of your students or members within your collective that you care to share?
Sure. I mean, I would say the running theme with all of my clients that say yes to doing the root healing work, especially, they come out having found their voice, having found their root voice, right? To speak up for themselves, to confront somebody who's treating them like shit, right? They found the strength to set boundaries. That's huge. I would say that's like the
That is
common
huge.
thread, and I think everybody who's attracted to my work, the membership, they understand, it's finally clicked in their head that you can't experience real transformation in your life unless you are transforming on all levels of your being. So you can't just read a book about ancestral healing and heal ancestral trauma. It's good to have a cognitive, intellectual understanding about it. But unless you're doing the emotional processing, going through a spiritual awakening, and actually moving the energies on a physical level, which is a nervous system level, you're not going to experience a new reality, right? Because you can understand things in your head, we're all smart. You're smart. I'm smart. But if you're on a nervous system level, which is subconscious, you're still afraid to experience pleasure because you feel like you're going to go to hell. Right. Or if seriously, you will not experience a new reality. And so we're working in my practice in the membership on healing and transformation on all levels of our being. And I would say everyone has experienced refined intuition, the development of their intuitive and psychic abilities because of this work, because it brings your nervous system online. It increases sensate focus in the cervix, which is the portal and the oracle, your connection to other dimensions, to your ancestors, to Mother Earth. And I believe everybody, but especially female bodied beings, have psychic and intuitive abilities. It's just a matter of how tuned in you are to it and what your conditioning is around blocking it, right? Because if you're taught you're weird, you're a witch, you're the devil, you are going to block it out. You are going to maybe get a hint about something and you will actively suppress it and actively push it away. But, and, obviously there are like Olympic level psychics, there's Tyler Henry, there's, the woman on TLC. There are some people who are exceptionally gifted mediums. Not everybody who's psychic is a medium. Every medium is psychic, but not every psychic is a medium. So there are people who are very advanced and very exceptional and they stand out like this is their gift. But I really feel like everyone has psychic and intuitive abilities, but especially female bodied beings, because we are the living embodiment of Mother Nature on the planet. I mean, you're a mom. You gave birth to another being, which is a crazy, beautiful spiritual adventure that you said yes to, walking this path in this life. And you are a walking portal, right, between dimensions. I mean, it's so wild. So we're so much more powerful than we realize.
What I'm seeing as your work is that you're igniting the innate gifts that we all have. And it's just there, but yet suppressed and somewhat hidden by the subconscious mind to keep us safe. Because there are the stories that are literally embedded in our DNA that's like, oh, if I open up and speak up and share my gifts, I could literally get killed. But you're helping them work through that and heal it so that they can share, they can have the courage to speak their truth, to speak up and share whatever it is in their hearts to share. And I think that is such potent, profound, and beautiful and much needed work. So thank you for just being on this path and for saying yes and courageously sharing it out there, because it is so necessary. And it's just also so beautiful to be on this path with you where we get to share our work, we get to collaborate, we get to just reflect each other as well. In terms of reflecting, I'd love to open the space for your reflection of what 2024 was like for you, and as a result, what you are cultivating and creating for the next Gregorian year.
Thank you. Well, so this has been a fantastic year. I've had some growing experiences that I'm really grateful for, but I got married, first of all. I celebrated my divine union with my sacred companion. So that was beautiful. But some people fell off this year too. And as painful as it was also really liberating, because I actually realized that this relationship was making me play small, and I'm no longer willing to do that. And so it's been very liberating in that sense. I feel lighter for sure. I also am a bonus mom to a 12-year-old boy now. So that's a new adventure that I've started this year, having this young elder in my life who so
could so relate.
Yes, full of joy and aliveness and makes me laugh all the time, but there are also challenges associated with that. I mean, I'm part of a blended family now. So I'm definitely growing in that way, maturing in that way. But it's been a great year. And, I celebrated 1 year of doing the membership. I started the podcast. lots to celebrate, lots to be proud of. And I'm in the process of doing my winter 2025 reset and preview right now. But what I'll say is that in the next Gregorian year, I am very much going to be focused on my investments and getting myself situated to really feel secure and abundant as I, you know, grow older. And I'm really focused on building this legacy with my husband, with my divine companion. What is our legacy that we're going to leave for our family? But also thinking about how are we taking care of our elders too, right? What can we do to take care of them? So yeah, I'm really focused on resources this year and making things work for me instead of working so hard, working smarter, not harder, getting things on automatic. I'm going to keep doing the podcast. I love it because it's so easy, because I love talking to people. I mean, I'm the Gemini rising. I'm very talkative. I'm very inquisitive. It's very natural. So it's really enjoyable for me. I mean, it would be great to have a virtual assistant. I mean, I think that's coming soon to just offload some of the logistical work. But in terms of having these conversations and recording them, it's super easy and enjoyable and feels very in alignment. And I think these conversations are important for people to hear. Ancestral healing is a real thing. You can play out patterns that have been on repeat for generations, and you can break them, you can change them, you can start new cycles of healing and peace and abundance and resilience and embodied joy, right? And it's all there for you.
Amen to that. And that is the power of your work, is that you help women be cycle starters. And what I'm seeing is this pattern interrupt, consciously saying, wait, this has been a pattern, and I'm seeing this in my mom, I'm seeing this in my grandma, and who knows how many generations this has gone for, and I'm no longer available. This stops with me. But to create that declaration requires the work, and that's where you come in. And I just feel like you are so aligned and on purpose. This really does feel like a natural progression of all that you have experienced in your life from a very young age. And it feels embodied because of all the challenges that you're continuously having to weed through, because like we spoke about not so long ago, it's not a one and done kind of thing. This journey is not for the faint of heart, because you're going to continuously have to go through the various layers. And I see how courageous and brave you are to just say yes continuously. And as a result, bring people who are ready along with you in this journey. So amazing. So
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you. Thank you for witnessing me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for walking this path with me. We've definitely had past lives together.
For sure.
Yeah, I have no doubt
Notes. Yeah.
about that. And yeah, it's such a joy to be able to text you, be on a Zoom call when you're in the Philippines. And it's just like no time has passed, right? We speak the same language. We have the same ancestors pretty much. It's such a beautiful, beautiful gift in my life. And yeah, I mean, I just saw too much. I saw too much stuff from my grandmother that was poured into my mom, being poured into my siblings, and then poured into my siblings' children. And that was really the inspiration for a lot of this. I was like, no, 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 this ends. This stops with me.
Right there with you. And I think that's why we can relate, because we speak the same language, we have a similar background, and we are doing the work. And as a result, we are creating a big shift, a massive shift for generations to come.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate this time. I really appreciate this chat. And yeah, it's healing for me. I mean, I had some tears, you know, it was good. It was good. There are layers, right? There's
Yeah.
always layers. Healing is a spiral. It is not linear. So
No.
be prepared, but it's so worth it, is what I will end with.
I love that you said that. Yes, 100% worth it. I will back you up on saying that because in the pain and the alchemical process, as a result, so much beauty is birth. And that goes just beyond what we experience personally, but it creates a ripple effect for other people.
Yes.
And as I said, generations to come.
Yes, 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, you know, and when we are happy, when we're feeling embodied joy, our ancestors on the other side are feeling that embodied joy, or, you know, as much as they can on the other side, but they feel it. And the other thing to know is that your ancestors want to be in relationship with you, and the healed, whole, and abundant ones, they are working behind the scenes constantly to set you up for big wins and huge healing. Always. They are with you. They stand by you. They are supporting you. So just trust that you are divinely protected.
I have to say, I have you to thank for bringing that into my awareness, because since you started getting into this work, it brought that consciousness that I have my healthy ancestors and I can call on them. And ever since then, I've been calling on them, and amazing things have happened. Let's say when I'm in a bind, or I don't have any idea of how it's going to move forward, I call on a specific ancestor that I know can support that. And all of a sudden things start to open up.
I love that. Yeah. That's great. You have to open the door to them, right?
Yes.
They're ready.
You create that connection.
But you got to start that connection.
So, yeah, I have you to thank for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I receive that. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, you and I could talk for hours and hours. We know this. This has been beautiful. I hope this is helpful for our community. I think it will be.
I'm so sure.
Yeah. So you guys have a blessed day. Xandrine, love you. I'm so deeply appreciative of you. And we're done. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time on the Cycle Starters podcast.